What's happening, everybody? Thank you again for joining me for another BG Wednesday live podcast. Rocking it with a 5 o'clock shadow tonight. I got home from work, got everything together for everybody here, and this is going to be a good one. So I have with me, all right, somebody I met on X. Okay, he goes by Urban Official. And me and this guy, we've been chatting with each other over the course couple months. He's actually sent a lot of really good information my way, and I really appreciate him doing that. And we have the topic he's going to be joining us for tonight. He actually brought to my attention the technical term for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this down, and we're going to discuss dialectical assassination and mind viruses. And I'm going to go ahead and bring Mr. Urban on right now. How we doing tonight?
Hello, how's it going?
Thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate you being here and sitting down with me and chopping it up and kind of breaking all of this down. But before we start, Mr. Urban, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your background?
Honestly, I'm just a hobbyist. This is my first interview on podcasts, so I'm getting a foot in the door, if you say it that way. But I just do general research. I collect information. Technically, I do computer programming, web development. I'm getting into the AI scene and some application scene. But just a little bit of anything that interests me, really. I like to collect information, and I like to ask the question why. So anything that I come across, why does it work? Why does it do that? What's the deal with that? And I just follow down a rabbit hole until I figure out why.
And I dig that, man. I dig that. I think a lot of us are kind of in the same boat here. We're hobbyists, but we're asking these bigger questions. We're doing this research, and we're bringing this information to the table. And I feel like people like you and I are actually some of the only ones trying to deliver truth nowadays. And that's hopefully that changes. But nonetheless, let's get into the topic. So dialectical assassination. Let's talk about this, because the one thing we see a lot of going on right now is this exact thing. I mean, we have people in our community constantly fighting amongst themselves. We have these key polarity events, I would say, that drive wedges not only between the general population, but people in our community and the other communities as well. So Josh, where did you stumble upon this technical term? And let's do a little bit of a breakdown together on what dialectical assassination is.
Well, let me say one quick thing first, and then I will attribute that, and I'll explain it a little bit. First off, the biggest key to a mind virus, to this whole thing we're discussing, is that both of us have to admit right here at the beginning that neither of us are claiming to know the truth. We're not claiming to know everything or anything. We may be right, we may be wrong on some things, and if there's anything that is incorrect, we'll correct that. But we're not claiming to know the one true truth. We're just here to present some information, to talk about it, to think about it. And that's the biggest key. That is the most fundamental defense against the mind virus. So, dialectical assassination, the term actually came from an interview that I had seen with Fritz Springmeier. And who he is, you may know him, any of the people listening, from the 13 Bloodlines of the Illuminati book. He did a book and he did a genealogical survey. So he is the reason that we know the 13 families, or so they are called. But he did some massive research into that. He's a very smart guy, and he's definitely probably one of the best resources out there for investigating this stuff from a truly research standpoint. But he invented the term, I suppose, and he explained it a little bit. So we're going to kind of expound on his definition, because it made a lot of sense.
Absolutely, man. And one thing I want to add, and I like that little the disclaimer you added, because one of the biggest things here on BG Cast is we're learning together. I am just in the same boat as you and everybody else. This is just us discussing ideas and learning about them together, man. So what I'm going to do real quick, Josh, is let me pull up a definition real quick for this, and then you and I can go to town, my friends.
Let's do it.
So I got right here. So I got the definition of dialectic. I'm going to pull up right here just so everybody can kind of get an understanding of that term. So we got originally a form of logical argumentation, but now a philosophical concept of evolution applied to diverse fields, including thought, nature, and history. So that kind of ties into what we're talking about. What do you think, Mr. Urban?
Yeah, that is fundamentally the term dialectic that I'm kind of talking about. It really falls within the whole debate. You see this come out in debates. So if you're going to talk to somebody who might have a disagreeing opinion and you want to sit down and talk about it, that is kind of a form of a dialectic, and how you guys go back and forth. And as we know, that is fundamentally what has been decaying in society and the internet. It's the ability to have a logical discourse, a logical debate, a logical dialectic, without one person or both persons losing their cool, losing their temper, or just people becoming separated. You've had families falling apart over this type of stuff.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I think it's been a common thing. A lot of people say since Trump was elected, I think personally this started to really become a thing, and this the civil dialectic started to die down around 2012. I'd say around that period of time where we were cusping into what we would call the new age. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
You're right. 2016 actually was a interesting year. I mean, having witnessed it, I was little. I was my teenager. I was a teenager at the time when Trump was elected. But I watched it and I thought it was really interesting to watch it so kind of closely. And I definitely agree that since 2016, there has been a decay of some sorts. We could say loosely dialectic. It's been dialectic, but it's also been in many other areas. So we'll just use it as a loose term. There's been this decay in the way that people speak to each other and their ideas on certain things and just the way they present those ideas. And there's just been this kind of corruption from the inside of this thing. It definitely seems like that started around 2016.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you. I really do think it did kind of hit ahead in 2016 because that's when I think we saw the massive polarization of everything. And that's when, I mean, I seen the radical left kind of rise up from, I called it in 2012, what happened to us is we got an expansion pack downloaded onto our reality. It wasn't the end of the world, but it was, I call it the human ascension test run. And I've noticed since 2012 that you see this, what I would call this cacophony of this kind of stuff starting to manifest and kind of take hold, not only in the human collective, but, throughout, I mean, everything. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that play into it. I think another fundamental, excuse me, a fundamental reason this is happening is how prevalent social media became in that time. Social media has really, um, it was around for a few years before 2012, no doubt, but it really after 2012, you can see a noticeable difference in the landscape of the internet. The majority of people are now on a handful of platforms, and I think those platforms and social media as a general actually functions as what's known as a Skinner box. This is from BK Skinner, who was a behavioral psychologist, I believe. And his idea was that he put animals into this little box, and they had little levers where they could press to get food or whatnot. And the idea was that these animals would condition themselves over a span of time. So, in the social media sense, as a Skinner box, social media acts as a societal conditioning. It is a contained system wherein society is actually conditioning itself over time.
You kind of hit the nail on the head there. I've been saying for a long time that, I mean, at least over the past 3 to 4 years, I've noticed the social media, especially TikTok, almost become kind of a mainstream media for people in our community. I mean, what do you think about that?
That's the epitome of it. I didn't even bring up TikTok, but yeah, let's go from 2012 to 2016, and TikTok wasn't quite here yet, but you're starting to see that what you just mentioned. You're starting to see social media start to be the primary source of people's news and their information about the world. Previously this would have been from cable news. It still is to some extent today, but we definitely know that those numbers are dropping very quickly. TikTok comes along, and TikTok really knocks that into overdrive. And that's where we're at today. You see, TikTok has become the most popular app. Uh, I don't remember what the statistic was. I know it's one of the most popular apps um, that there is out right now. And the fact that it is now acting as a news source for people, a primary news source, that definitely is part of what we're talking about here.
And before we hop into this article, I want to run this thought by you because I know you're on this wavelength. I feel in a lot of ways that this is purposefully done. And I kind of use this kind of a little description to kind of, get people's brains into thinking about this because, we look at the US black budget. It's a ungodly amount of money, right? And, we know about the CIA and what they did as far as mind control techniques and all of their mind control experimentation and their manipulation experimentation. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they would take people, place them in communities, not even just realistic like everyday suburban communities or city communities, things like that, but put them in online communities to kind of help divert and disengage and kind of add to the dysfunction we see going on. What do you think about that?
Um, I agree with a lot of what you said. Let me just say this clearly. In my opinion, of course, with the budget being so high, and I believe, if I'm correct, there's a portion of the budget which is actually classified, so we don't actually know how much this specific budget is. So, one thing that is clear is that if it's a big if the government, the CIA, the NSA, all of these alphabet agencies, if they have not invested some significant amount of money into researching uh, this online problem, these online communities, like you said, if they have not done any type of digging into this, and the type of digging we're talking about, usually it's illegal digging under the
Absolutely.
Constitution, um, but yeah, so they've definitely done some of their tricks in the online community. Let's put it that way. And if they haven't, I would be very surprised because we're sitting here talking about it on the podcast. If they haven't figured that out with all that money, they're doing something very wrong. And I don't believe that they're doing anything wrong in that respect.
I'm with you on that, man. It is. To think that they haven't done something like that, because you look at how they understand and they've realized how much culture can drive a population. And we look at the culture that has surrounded social media and a lot of the what they would consider counterculture groups or dissident movements that that's what we're classified as in their eyes, that are taking to social media to try and deliver truth and try and build communities and network around like-minded people. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. But since we're talking about dialectical assassination, I think it's a really good point to bring up Hegelian dialect. What do you think about that? Because I think this kind of plays into a lot of what we're talking about. So, I mean, the Hegelian dialect, I'm going to break it down for you guys. Of course, um, I I definitely I'm not going to bore you with the entire article, but I always leave the links in the Rumble description and now in the YouTube description if you guys want to take a look at what we're talking about. But I think Hegelian dialect kind of comes into play with a lot of what we're dealing with right now. What do you think there, Mr. Urban?
Yeah, so really, when you use the word dialectic, fundamentally, like this article says, is that it involves contradictory sides, and this has kind of evolved in the modern time to this idea of polarity, and that's what we're seeing now, is that everything is so polar, and that is a tactic of, um, let's just say, those who would want control over the system. To gain control, the first step is to polarize, to divide and conquer, because, as we know, their strategy is to play both sides. So what they'll do is they'll divide the dialectic, the argument, and then they will kind of infuriate both sides to the point that they're arguing with one another, and that and dialectical assassination, they really just lose sight of what they're talking about at a certain point. They're so polar, and they're so against each other, that what happens is people stop looking at the facts, people stop trying to find reliable sources, stuff like that happens, and that really all happens due to extreme polarization, and that's the key word for the modern dialectic: extreme polarization.
And no, I'm with you, and it's funny because it not only affects people on opposing sides, it affects people in our community as well. And this is where I feel, you can add, or say whatever you want when I'm done here. I feel that that a lot of these events, some of them are targeted specifically at our community, because even though people in our community, we're very much on the same wavelength, we have very similar thoughts and ideas when we're talking about this stuff, but there's still a lot of key breaking points, or what I would call key division points, that still kind of exist in our community. What do you think about that?
Um, Say that last part again. I think I kind of missed that.
No, you're all good. You're all good. So basically, not just on opposing sides, we're dealing with this dialectical assassination, but we're even dealing with it in our own community. And I feel that a lot of these events that occur, certain events, are targeted directly at us. And I like to bring up the Israel Hamas incident, that occurred not too long ago, because I've never seen, aside from flat Earth, or in the flat Earth concept, I've never seen our community so divided after this happened. So I feel that what they do is they purposefully will not only keep the consensual population divided and in dialectical assassination, but any kind of counter to what they're doing, they are also doing that as well.
I'm actually glad that you added a couple extra details, because I kind of have a good answer for you now.
Awesome.
Um, so this is, at the end of the day, this is a very high dimensional, almost four-dimensional chess game that's being played. Um, to the extent that everything has a purpose that could be useful at some time. Now, that research that we mentioned before, those black budget research projects that could hypothetically be happening, they're approaching this from that stance. They're looking at this, the internet, and they're seeing, what can we do with these communities? How best can we use these communities to our advantage, whatever that advantage is? So the idea is that no matter what happens in the world stage, it's going to serve a purpose that was most likely planned. Where interests converge, a conspiracy is irrelevant, meaning wherever two people have something to gain in the same place, there's always going to be a conspiracy. You don't even need to consider it. But this idea is that, by the internet, with all this research, all these research dollars being poured into controlling these groups through the internet, I think that everything that we're witnessing now is most likely by design to serve some purpose, and that's what I mean by four-dimensional chess. Um, it depends on racial groups, gender groups, the whole gender movement. It's a four-dimensional dialectic, if you will.
Absolutely. No, and dude, you hit it really home, because it is. It's insane on how we're looking at all of this kind of unfold. And the hypothetical black budgets, they do. And so and that, you brought up a very good point that I bring up in my show a lot, is human psychology, human nature, and the psychology of governments. And you kind of just added that up. When two people in the same place have something to gain, a conspiracy is just what it is. And I think that's what a lot of people fall short with is, if you look at, human nature, human psychology, and the psychology of governments, that alone, you can potentially prove most conspiracy theories true. What do you think about that?
I think that's pretty accurate. I'll say from experience, what I've witnessed the most is that you really have a major polarity between the people, and typically it's a young versus older people. You have this polarity in people who are willing to accept that possibly the government doesn't have your best interests at heart all of the time. And then you have usually the older crowd, and what they have been conditioned and programmed throughout their lives, through television, music, etc., to have this Americana image where the government is not capable of doing anything bad. And that's a primary polarity there that is really making it hard for some people to wake up. um, but yeah.
100%. No, and I agree with that. And and that's one thing too. I mean, you look at a lot of the older generation. There's ones who are awakened there. But a lot of them, they. I don't give the boomers too much crap, but the one thing I will say is this: they were raised on propaganda. And now they are being greeted with information that kind of destroys the notion that the propaganda was real. So it's like almost like they're pulling they have the 4-foot splinter in them, but they don't want it pulled out. They're like, no, keep it in. I want to keep the 4-foot splinter in. So
So
go ahead. Yeah.
so to some extent, it's got, so like you said, that propaganda, and this comes in many forms. There's a lot of different type of propaganda, but I'm not going to get into that. Basically, this idea I've noticed is that when you have this propaganda in the older generation, for instance, this amount of time that they've spent developing this image, that splinter getting bigger and bigger, um, to some extent, some people I have discussions with, they don't even have the same image in their mind of what I see. You know, maybe I know too much about certain things, but to some people they just don't even have the words to, or dialectic to even conceptualize what's going on, because they've just gone so long and made it so normal. And that's what it is. The longer you go along with a certain type of view on the world, the harder it is to leave that behind. And I'm young, so it's probably easier for me. I can definitely imagine why some people have a hard time with that, and there's nothing against those people. I believe it'll happen in its own time whenever it's meant to happen.
Absolutely, I agree with you, man. And that's one thing I'm big on. I think we all have the capacity to awaken. We all have that divine spark within us. It's just a matter of realizing that it's there. And and I think everybody will in their time. I'm very optimistic like you on that. So the one thing I want to bring up real quick, what we were slightly chatting about before the show here, is the NIH article I found here on Divide and Conquer. So one thing I'm really starting to see that I'm really kind of starting to enjoy here is that NIH, like I was chatting with you about before the show, uh, um, either they don't realize they have a lot of evidence that supports our arguments, or they do, and it's some kind of slow drip feed, but their database is big. But we got divide and conquer, intermediate levels of population fragmentation maximize cultural accumulation. So, I mean, right here, guys, we have this actual article here, and I'll get into it just a sec. So we got identifying the determinants of cumulative cultural evolution as a key issue in the interdisciplinary field of cultural evolution. A widely held view is that the large and well-connected social networks facilitate cumulative cultural evolution because they promote the spread of useful cultural traits and prevent the loss of cultural knowledge through factors such as drift. So they're kind of talking about how they're using it for some kind of a cultural accumulation. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Urban?
So from the way I kind of read that and understand it, could you scroll back up to the top for me real quick?
Absolutely, no problem, man. Hold on.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. So you want the abstract
The title actually.
title? There we go. Boom.
So it says intermediate levels of population fragmentation maximize cultural accumulation. So the way that I read that is that a intermediate level of population fragmentation. So kind of an average level of how fragmented and how divided your population is. You want to aim for kind of the middle. That's the best way to accumulate um, cultural accumulation, to accumulate different cultures or cultural heritage. But yeah, I think that that makes sense, and I think that it definitely could indicate in the future that this driving apart of people at the rate that it is may actually prove detrimental to cultural accumulation.
And I would completely agree with you on that, because the way this is going at this point in time, I mean, the division is going to get to the point where, let's just entertain the consensual narrative a little bit when I say this. So, a government, let's say we have a government, and they have to keep their population at least somewhat divided in order to maintain control. But if you make the population too divided, you're ultimately going to end up losing that control, because the population is going to start fighting themselves. And once they start fighting themselves, then your control of the population kind of goes to the wayside. What do you think about that statement?
Yeah, that really falls in line with this article. I'm sitting here trying to kind of think through what would happen. Let's say we polarize people too much and they start fighting inside, like in between themselves. What is that going to do to these cultures? So you have all out war. It could remove some cultures. You also have some cultures that have more dominance in some areas, population wise. I think that really when you start infighting, it's going to, at this point, I've even heard of families kind of splitting up over these issues. It's really going to shake up the cultural idea of a community when they become so polarized, because polarization, uh, stress, let's say stress, is what usually drives change. So if you push these cultures to breaking point, what's going to happen is that they're going to eventually lose their heritage over time.
Absolutely, no, I would agree, because when you have that, they start to, they almost, like we were saying, it's no longer about what we're arguing or what we're having the dialectic about. It just becomes about the argument itself. It just becomes what I would call a feud of passion at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot of really bad, and I think my citation for this would be history. You just got to look at history to see what happens um, when the population becomes unrestful towards themselves. I think you've never really seen time in history where that ends well. That's why people are bringing up the term civil war. It's because it's starting to appear in the zeitgeist, the societal mind. People are starting to throw around the word, and it sure appears that the movies and the television shows are programming this whole civil war idea into us. And it's no surprise that that word started coming up right around the time of those movies that just came out.
And so that's one thing I agree with you wholeheartedly with there, Mr. Urban, because I've used this analogy quite a few times, and I'll get your thoughts on it. I call it the Truman Show analogy, except instead of, in our world, we're not being advertised products, we're being advertised narratives and trains of thought. And whatever narrative or train of thought that we buy into becomes our subjective reality. But if enough of the collective buys into this narrative or this train of thought, it becomes the collective reality. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. There's absolutely a dimensional level to these things. That's what I mean when I say dimensional. I know that's probably not the scientific term, but when I think of dimensional, it's that. It's that, you have a single human being and you have the nuclear family, and that's your family unit. Instead of just a human, you've got a higher dimensional unit. Then you have multiple families, and that forms a community. That's a higher dimensional unit. So that's what we're talking about when we say higher dimensional. So what's happening is, with all of that research that may or may not be happening by the CIA and the NSA and all of those alphabet agencies, they're learning how to drive these higher level, higher dimensional collectives. What they're doing is they're learning how to use the internet to gather data, which we're willingly giving over in most cases, all of us, to drive us in the position or in the direction they would like us to go. If they want us to buy certain products, they have all this data on us plus AI. They're developing a programmatical interface for society, and that's a very big idea. I know it might not be easy to understand when I first throw it out there. I'm a computer programmer, so when I say that, there's a lot that goes behind it. But they're developing methods by which they can flick little switches and do little tiny adjustments to move society in a specific direction. They're creating a method that allows them to drive society. They've thrown a saddle onto society in the metaphorical sense.
And no, you're right. So, and even kind of touching on the 4D chess, I've actually, I've, the term might not be correct. I've actually kind of called it 5D pragmatism almost to a degree. It's because they are somehow able in some way, shape, or form. And I'm starting to get how they look at this. They're able to see a cause, and they are able to enact that very simple cause to elicit just such a massive effect on a grand scale. What do you think about that?
That's the beauty of social media. It is incredible, and you can look in many different places, but it is incredibly easy for a person, let's say TikTok, for a person to make a video and then wake up the next morning and it's got a million views. It's incredibly easy to spread any type of information, true or false or a mix of both. It's incredibly easy to spread this stuff through social media. And that is why it is a very good interface for society. It's not that they just have all this data, it's that they have control over the whole internet to some extent. If they just flick a few little switches in the right area, let's say on Twitter, they make one little adjustment on this post that makes it go viral on the right account, that can spread like wildfire in a matter of hours. And that's how easy it is to get people talking, to get people focused on an idea. And once they're focused on an idea, that polarity is going to come naturally. Polarity is natural in most forms. You have positive and negative, you have hot and cold. So it's going to come naturally once people become focused on something.
And you're absolutely right, man. And while we're here, let's so one thing I want to pull up for everybody here is the definition of mind virus. So I have an abstract from a scientific journal. Or it's actually from a book that Richard Dawkins wrote. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a huge Richard Dawkins fan, but I think this kind of sums up the definition of a mind virus to a T. And of course, like I said, I don't agree with the entire definition because well, of course, it could happen that way also. So let's go over here. We got the inflicted self revisiting the metaphor of the mind virus. So I'm just going to go over the abstract real quick. So we got the idea that units of culture may act as a virus controlling some of the perceptions and actions of individuals has been the subject of considerable controversy since proposed by evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins. This debate has occurred in the absence of a defined mental viral structure or a target body upon which such viral structures may act. This article develops a paradigm in which the self is understood, as such a body upon which future research into mind viruses may be undertaken. Possible mechanisms for mind viral transmission are discussed. Criteria for defining a mental virus are used to examine evidence of possible mind virus contagion in suicides, cults, terrorism, and religion. Which on religion, it's I think that's not as black and white as what they're saying. But what do you think about that definition there, Mr. Urban?
So with these things, with stuff like mind virus, it's got to flow from the individual mind to a higher level. So to go to a societal mind, you have to access the mind of all of the individuals, and we do this through smartphones and AI now. So AI paired with the data from your smartphone gives them a perfect picture of you as a person. So
Absolutely.
go ahead.
No, I was just saying absolutely. Go right ahead, man.
Oh, so once you have enough data on a collective group of people and you start driving them towards a destination, this really comes naturally. And this whole mind virus thing, being such a new term, really we're witnessing it in real time. And that's kind of the frightening part. We don't have much data on it right now. But from what I am seeing, there is definitely this decay in the behavioral of people on the internet, and from what I witness on the internet, and it comes in the form of that dialectic, the way people are talking to each other, how on the edge they are, etc. But it definitely does indicate that there is some type of mind virus potentially going around.
And no, I 100% agree, because we can see this, with our own two eyes. I mean, we have somebody who has an opposing idea, or, has a different viewpoint on a certain topic. And instead of trying to initiate what I would say is a respectful conversation about it, I would have gone about it like, let's say I'm not a flat earther, I'm not a round earther. I have my own opinions about what's going on, but like, let's say I stated my opinion and a flat earther was like, well, I'd like to talk to you about why you think this way. And, maybe, I'll hear out what you think and you hear out what I think. I think if it was done in that fashion, that would be good for us, but bad for them. So that's why they kind of keep up this dysfunction, and they keep hitting, I call it, they hit these emotional trigger points is what they do. If we look at a lot of these staged events that are underway on the world stage, they always seem to hit these emotional trigger points. And that's because these people, they understand human consciousness very well.
Yes.
They understand the mechanisms of the human psyche very well. So that's why we see almost every single event hitting that emotional trigger. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'll give a little bit of an example, but you were right, spot on with that. So I have some family who is on the other side of the spectrum, and I don't necessarily care about who they vote for or nothing like that. But what I have witnessed in terms of this mind virus, even in those older people, and let's just say they're not on the internet as much as you and I are. They're on Facebook and they watch a couple of videos, but nothing like you and I are.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't see a lot of information. But they have gone from, just basic politics and, oh, I like this guy, you like this guy. But recently they have become so focused on the character of Donald Trump, not who he is, but just Donald Trump, the name, that guy. And they've taken focus, and they, like I said, on our other example, you direct focus towards one thing. And then what they're doing is, like you said, they're hitting those emotional trigger points. They're focusing everyone on one polarizing topic, and then they're sprinkling in little bits of, it's just a television show. Think of it like a television show. They're amping up different bits of drama so that polarity goes from just a little polarized to really polarized. They're pulling that polarization further and further, and they do that by directing focus and by controlling the narrative.
And you're absolutely right. And I agree. I agree with everything you just said. I call it, I've used this analogy is there's some people who just want to believe the movie is real. And then when you try to show them it's not real, they get very upset and they're like, "Hey, stop telling me the movie's not real. I want to believe it's real." What do you think about that?
Yeah, and like I said in my example, that's kind of where I was at with those members of my family. Um, it's really interesting, that whole idea of stop. I don't want to hear any more about that. Obviously they don't even quite know that it's going to be, because they don't want their whole perception to come down. Obviously nobody comes right out and says that. But it's really interesting, because that is very true. You will hit a point with these people, and nothing against these people. You will hit a point with the people who are on the opposite side, who don't want to believe, where they will rather forcefully tell you that they don't want to hear anymore. And it really is like you hit that point. So that's very real. At some point, when you have enough evidence or enough sneaking suspicion, in my book, if I have a sneaking suspicion, I need to get hard evidence to make sure that I'm right or wrong. Very rarely will I argue something as fact if I don't have good evidence or have seen a lot. And unfortunately, it's a little bit of both. I've seen enough formal evidence, and I've also just seen too much. And the amount of things I've seen paired with the evidence gives me no other option but to conclude, most likely, the government does not have our best interest in heart.
I would wholeheartedly agree, and I think that evidence, at least nowadays, is showcasing itself very blatantly. And I know you said you were a teenager in 2016. So I remember when I first woke up in 2008. When you were looking for this stuff, it wasn't as blatant as it once was, and I've noticed that now it has become so blatant that our government does not have our best interest in mind. But I feel we're talking about cognitive dissonance from that other side of the population coming into play, because they have fallen in love, like what you stated earlier in the show, with that belief in that Americana, that that this is just a perfect place, and that our government is beneficial to us, and wants to look out for us. But actions speak louder than words in my eyes. And when you look at the actions of everything that's going on at this point in time, you absolutely see, I think it's proving itself at this point. What do you think?
So truly, what I've seen, this whole idea is gaslighting. We're being gaslit by the government, and I don't think that's a stretch to say. I think that's relatively factual. We're being gaslit. Now, we'll get to talking about this shortly, but I have my own theory, that there is this whole narrative internet presence, and it's being done through AI bots. And I think what's going on is that we're being gaslit, and in order to gaslight us, in order to get away with it, what they do is they create these little miniature narratives. They can't get away with too much, but they can run a story with a few, fallacies and a few little bits of evidence missing. They can get away with that, and that might be enough if they, like I said, share the right post on the right account. Now, I think they're gaslighting us, and they're getting away with it partly because of that crowd who has the cognitive dissonance, and partly because it's so easy to get people, the younger generation who's on the internet, so easy to implant ideas, perspectives, and stories that may or may not be true in people's heads. And this totally applies to factual information. If you show the right crowd factual information, it can definitely affect their behavior. So
Oh,
it
yeah.
works on both sides.
No, and I'm with you, man. So you brought up a very good point, because I've used this analogy. They most certainly are gaslighting us, and they have told us that they were gaslighting us. So they are really big on symbolism, and that's something I'm very good on picking out. So do you remember when they were trying to ban gas stoves and gas vehicles? So gas stoves, gas vehicles, gaslighting. That was what they were trying to. They were so subtly, with plausible deniability, kind of giving us a symbolic reference to what they're doing. Did you happen to pick that out?
I had heard about that. I had heard, amongst other things, you're referring to this kind of green initiative. I won't speak on it broadly, but in
Yep.
terms of that, um, I think, yeah, really at the point we're at, what they're doing is they're testing the waters. You know, they're seeing what will happen if they do this, what will happen if they do that. Can we get away with taking this whatever? You know, can we get away with doing away with gas? And you know, whatever they tell us, it doesn't matter, because the business interests, the people who are millionaires and billionaires, who are way richer than you and I will ever probably be, they think about this completely differently than you and I do. So whenever there's this whole talk of banning gas, there's what we think, and then there's what's going on behind the business scene. What does this mean in a business sense? Does it mean that one company is going to be getting more profitable than the other? Who's getting all these contracts? You know, there's a lot of angles to this, but I think we all need to unite, everyone, no matter what race you are, no matter who you're voting for, and we need to start looking in to that business scene. Okay, they want to ban gas. What's going on? Why do they want to ban gas? Don't look at your neighbor who voted for Trump and you voted for Biden. Look at the businesses who are, you know, they are the ones driving politics, and everyone can agree on that for the most part. Even the cognitive dissonance crowd agrees with me that business is driving politics. They don't know how much, but they know that it's driving politics. So we all need to put our attention there, and we need to lobby and or not lobby. We need to really get behind and put an effort out towards regulating the financial industry. I would start with lobbying.
That 100%. We do need to start regulating the financial industry. That's why I feel at this point in time. Before we get into what I was going to say, though, I want to bring up, and you'll probably appreciate this, Mr. Urban, because you and I have talked about this a couple of times. But I'm going to bring up the ultimate mind virus that's kind of plaguing our society. But the good thing about it is it seems like it's starting to break. So I'm going to pull up here. We've got the woke mind virus is finally starting to break. Over the last decade, what Elon Musk calls the woke mind virus has infected the American mind. There are many aspects to what it means to be woke, but the parts compromising it are a stew of grievance, oppression, and identity politics. More could be said, of course, but for simplicity's sake, wokeism is a catch all term for the academic influence of critical race theory on American culture. I would argue that over the last decade, and especially since 2020, wokeism overtook America. My belief, though, is that the high point of wokeness has crested, and America is finally breaking free of the virus that once captivated and captured America's mind into adopting absurd and simplistic categories for navigating social interactions. So, what are your thoughts on that, Mr. Urban?
Actually, so first of all, I like to spread a little bit of information wherever I go. So, a guy who has some really good information on this, he was just on Joe Rogan. His name is James Lindsay, and he hosts the New Discourses podcast. I suggest everyone check him out. But this whole idea of wokeism goes back to the DEI, and I can tell you, in my opinion, the reason this woke mind virus is going away slowly is because people aren't buying it. Look what happened with Disney. Their movies are flopping. All of these movies are flopping. The money is starting to talk. And if I could say one thing that I would tell anybody, the number one way to achieve change in this world, this modern world, is to do it through financial speak. If you
Damn right.
don't like something, you don't spend your money there. And once enough people do that, like we see now with this woke stuff, they got the message, and so they're easing back on it. And I think, as New Discourses, James Lindsay had said in one of his podcasts, he says that he believes that the woke DEI has failed and that it will fail sooner or later, sooner hopefully. But he says that he's pretty confident that it's going to fail. People aren't buying it. So the money has spoken is basically what we're seeing here.
And you just hit the nail on the head. And I've as much as I'm not a fan of the dollar, it is your biggest vote right now, um, in this civilization, this society, because I mean, look at what happened to a lot of these companies who tried to imbibe in the woke mind virus. They ended up flopping. I mean, we saw Bud Light basically giving away free beer because they were losing money. I mean, we saw what happened with Disney, just as you stated. I mean, even Target took a hit, and now we see a lot of these other corporate chains. I called 2023 the year of corporate suicide, is what I was calling that, because when you look back at all of the different corporations who attempted to go woke and adopt the woke mind virus, it ultimately almost became their undoing. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, that's the biggest piece of advice I could give anybody. It's a completely, passive way to protest, and it is probably the most effective protest that we could do. Um, yeah, I think that is probably a lesson we need to learn, because I think that might actually get us somewhere. If it's worked here, let's see what happens. But if this woke thing really takes a nosedive, I think we have good evidence that this is a plausible strategy. So anything that we don't like, anything that is obvious of this, diversity, equity, inclusion agenda, anything like it, anything that the people don't want, I think they need to speak with their money, and I think it'll go away.
And you're absolutely right, man. And that's fantastic. And I think we need to start, kind of making an awareness of this with people, and start to kind of bring awareness to this fact, because I know there's a lot of people out there who still feel like their voices aren't heard when it comes to what they want in this society, but it just stops spending money on it, and so the one thing I want to bring up real quick is, what can we do to have more awareness of this, so we can stop falling into their game, and we can start throwing them curveballs. Because I mean, my thoughts are this, and then I'll ask you your thoughts. I think that we have to gain the awareness of that fact, that this is what they're doing. And I know a lot of people are still on the fence about having this awareness of what they're doing, because when those emotional trigger polarizing events come out, depending on if this individual is heavily emotionally invested into what happens on either side of this event, that awareness can go out the window due to straight emotional passion. But what I think we have to do is we have to approach every single event that occurs, every single news story that we see, every single instance where this is going. We have to act with awareness of that fact and not play into it. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, yeah, and I pretty much agree with that. I have a question just out of the blue.
Absolutely.
How long do you think it will be until people of our age group inherit the U.S. government?
That's an interesting question, and that's not a black and white one for me. I think it really dictates what we in this collective truly decide what we want in a world, because right now we're being shown a world that we don't want, and we're this is being showcased to us as plain as day, in my opinion. And the good news is, because I'm an elder millennial, I was born in '88, and a lot of my generation, whether they're at least halfway there. I'm gonna say there's some that aren't there at all. Don't get me wrong, but a good portion of my generation is at least halfway there. They may have not exactly have come to the awareness about what's going on as far as the government. But what I do see showcasing itself is, I see this renewed interest in homesteading. I see this renewed interest in learning skills, things that are practical for the everyday world. I see a renewed interest in spiritual concepts that are outside of the organized Judeo Christian religions. I see a lot of these concepts, and this is where I kind of break it down. I call it there's two aspects to this awakening going on right now. We have the conscious awakening and the subconscious awakening. The conscious awakening, that aspect of us, that is what people like you and I are going through. We are aware of what is happening, and we are trying to learn about it together, and we're trying to figure it out. And then what I would mean by the subconscious awakening is people like us have an energetic ripple effect in the consciousness field. And as we continue to remember more, learn more, things like that, it has an energetic effect, not just on the rest of our age group, but the rest of the collective as well. And I think there will come a time where we do reach a somewhat of a majority awakening level. I think we're going to, once we hit 51% of the globe, at that point, we are now in a majority awareness of what's going on. And if that does occur, I do think what would potentially happen is my generation would come in. We would inherit some kind of government. But I think with this newfound awareness, that's now becoming more of a collective awareness instead of just a group of subjective awarenesses at this point, I think it would be done differently. And that's if we decide, I'm positively optimistic, just like you are. On the worst case scenario, we could have an instance where, we never get to inherit it. It's kept from us, or certain select people from our generation are allowed to inherit it because they're the ones who are either in on what's going on, or they have been conditioned to think what's going on is okay. Those are my thoughts. I'd love to get yours, honestly.
Yeah, really, there is a fundamental problem in the whole government right now, and it borders on conspiracy theory level. But I think there's a blackmail operation going on, and that's the way you get in power. I did a case study, just nothing official, but I watched actually, he was a Democratic representative, and he had just been elected to his first term. His name was Jeff Jackson. And I liked this guy. This guy was great. He actually would sit down and talk to you like you were an adult, and he would be reasonable and explain what was going on. And I said, if this guy makes it far in politics, I will consider that maybe there are some good politicians. And sure as shit, he's been gerrymandered out of his seat, and he's leaving Congress. I think he's running for Attorney General of his state, North Carolina. But I think he doesn't want to play the game, or he's getting out. I think he knows what's going on and he doesn't want any part of it. I think if you're going to be leadership, if you're going to be a fundamental member of Congress, they're going to get blackmail on you. If you know it, maybe you don't know it, but they're going to come knocking when it's time to play ball. And if you don't play ball, you're not going to last there. That's the conspiracy theory way of how it works. So
100%.
Yeah, so if our generation gets there and that's the only way in, that's a sad day if that happens. But I would hope that some people who are getting more awake and older start running for office and try to get representation of this open mind crowd. And I'm sure that there are many successful people out there with the financial backing, uh, in the tech field and the research field that may actually stand a chance if they get some boots on the ground and localize their community. But I would love to see that. But I generally fear for that scenario, that there is an organized blackmail operation going on. And unfortunately, I'm starting to see a lot of evidence that says that there are key members who are absolutely being blackmailed. This is why you see people right now, the government, they're united when it comes to banning TikTok, when it comes to renewing FISA, but then they're divided for all this other stuff. It really shows that there's a disconnect between the politicians who supposedly represent us and what's actually happening. And if you consider, I'm not saying it's true or false, I'm saying if you plug this idea that maybe some of them are being blackmailed in, and you run the scenario, if some of them were being blackmailed, would it make sense that they're not voting the way that they should be voting for their constituents? That makes sense.
Absolutely. And you want to know what's funny? I actually have a story for you real quick. And you can go follow her on X. She's a friend of mine. So I actually I know her. Her name was Forest Mommy, but her name is Jess in real life. And she actually ran for a libertarian candidate out here in Arvada for the Arvada City Council of District 4. So she actually took the libertarian stance. Shout out to Forest Mommy if she's watching, by the way. She took the Libertarian Party when she went in there. And I tell you what, man, that the smearing that went down, they tried to frame like some kind of pedophilia thing on her. It wasn't even her in the photos. A completely different person, but they were trying to say it was her. They had journalists out here in the Denver area just literally going into town on defamation of her character. And I personally feel that she was the same thing. She was booted out of the race. I mean, I think they definitely they rigged that race in the favor of the other opponent. And I've even seen this on a local level, man. It's not even just in in a federal and state level, and I think that just kind of gives a testament to how far, I'll borrow a quote from Charlie Robinson on this, that octopus goes, dude, how far that those tentacles go through not just federal government, but state government and even down to local and county governments as well. So, man, Mr. Urban, I got to start wrapping it up here for tonight. I feel like we didn't get a chance to explain everything and talk about everything, but I got to say this, man, you really impressed me for your age. How intelligent you are, how good at delivery you are about this information. And I gotta say, man, you knocked them dead tonight, dude. And I definitely want to have you on for a round two. And I potentially, because of how smart you are and your expertise in this, would want to potentially make you a part of BG Cast. And that's something we can talk about after the show. But real quick, man, we're definitely going to do a round two, but I want you just to tell everybody where they can find you and look you up and find your occult library and everything like that.
Yeah, for sure. If you want to make sure to post the links, I will send them to you to post, or I don't know, maybe I could post them, but it's X at official Urbanus. It's URBANUS, official Urbanus, no spaces. And I'll get him that link. Let's see. I wonder if I could join. No. Here, I'll send it to him and he could post it.
Absolutely. I will post it, guys, in the Rumble, the YouTube, and I'll slide it under the X video too.
All right.
Yeah,
And yeah, I've got all kinds of free resources there. I post all kinds of free resources, just anything I come across. I'm down to share everything that I find.
Absolutely, man. And I got to tell you, you just dropped it in the private chat right here.
Yes.
Let me bring it up real quick and just let everybody get a look. Let's pull this up real fast. So I got to say I dig the Donkey Kong. That's background. That's a little nostalgic for me right there. But here's his Twitter community, guys, his X community. Go ahead and give him a follow, man. He's always posting some really good stuff, some really, really good information, occult library. I mean, everything, man. So I'm going to say I highly recommend that if you're watching on X, you're watching the stream, go over and follow Mr. Urban here, man, and check out some of the stuff he has. I'm still not all the way through it, but I have to say, man, it's amazing. And I personally really appreciate that you're putting in this work and you're doing this and you're doing this diligent research to bring this to everybody. And I want to thank you for that, man.
I appreciate it. I appreciate getting to have a little chat with you tonight. And yeah, I'm definitely down to do some more of these. I was a little unprepared. I didn't get to do all the notes I wanted to do, but maybe next time I come on, I'll try to structure a little bit better and we can get to a little bit more. But yeah, I'm
Absolutely.
definitely down for more.
All right, so stick around, Mr. Urban. I'm just going to take you off the stage for a second, sign off, but then I want to chat with you for a second. All right, so just stay here. We'll take well, guys. That was a fantastic show. I have to say, Mr. Urban definitely impressed me over here, and I think we kind of really got a chance to break down at least what we could in the time slot. I did, 2.5 hour shows. I gotta cut it off at a little over an hour tonight, guys. I got stuff I gotta take care of, but he will be coming on for round two. I'm gonna be talking with him potentially in the end of May, beginning of June, to get him back on. And other than that, I hope you guys found this useful. And I really think what we have to do, guys, in this community, in this collective, is we have to have awareness of the fact that this is going on and we have to act accordingly. We cannot keep falling prey to that emotional trigger that they are throwing our way, because if we do, we're going to continuously just spin our wheels and get nothing done. So I think what we can take from this show tonight and what we can learn from is to, when we see a polarizing event occur, have non-attachment with it. Take a step back. Have that awareness that, hey, this is what they're doing. I'm not going to play into it. And the more people who decide to not play into it, the less effect it's going to have. So I want you all with me on this. We have to have this awareness of this fact. And I will continue to help you guys have this awareness of this fact. Well, guys, I am off here for tonight. I will be back next week. I have a really cool topic lined up for us that I will drop on Sunday. I will be on the End of Days Roundtable this Friday again. If you guys want to come over and check out Daniel and all of them over there at End of Days Radio. And I will be on Quantum Bridge Saturday morning. I've been looking at Quantum Bridge. If you're watching, here's a shout out. I've been looking forward. I've been talking with these people over at Quantum Bridge, and I'm looking forward to sitting down with them, having a conversation. Well, alrighty, everybody. You have yourselves a good night. Thank you again for joining me for another BG Cast Wednesday live podcast, and I will catch you all very soon. Take care, guys.